Every day after school, Jamal would walk straight to the public library, slipping through the heavy double doors like a shadow. The security guard barely glanced up anymore. The boy had become as much a fixture as the dusty shelves and flickering lights. Jamal always wore the same faded navy hoodie, pulled low over his face. It was too big for him, a hand-me-down from his older cousin who'd left for the military. The sleeves nearly covered his hands, and the hood swallowed his head. But to Jamal, it was armor, a shield from the cold, from the stairs, from the world. He always chose the same corner table, next to the broken radiator that hissed and clanked whenever the heat sputtered on. It wasn't the warmest spot in the library, but it was quiet, tucked between biographies and outdated atlases. From his worn backpack, he pulled out a beat-up laptop with a cracked screen and a stack of dog-eared notebooks, all filled with complex math problems, vocabulary drills, and handwritten notes in microscopic print. Around him, kids came and went. Some laughed loudly in the section. Others stared at their phones while pretending to read. The library staff had long since stopped asking him if he needed help. They thought he was just passing time. They had no idea that Jamal was teaching himself calculus, or that he had printed out pages from MIT's open courseware and annotated them like scripture, or that his walls at home were covered in college brochures, folded and taped with precision. At school, Jamal didn't stand out. He sat in the back of his classes, rarely spoke unless called on, and was often mistaken for a slacker because of his hoodie and downcast gaze. But inside, he was a storm, focused, relentless, and hungry. The only class where he let himself shine was AP Physics, and even then, he kept answers short, afraid to draw attention. The halls were filled with kids louder than him, dressed in designer sneakers, laughing in packs. When Jamal walked past, they called him library boy or hoodie head. Sometimes they tossed crumpled paper at him. Once, someone filmed him studying and posted it online with the caption, "Trying to look smart won't make you Harvard." Jamal saw it. Said nothing. He just kept studying. It happened on a Tuesday, one of those gray, forgettable afternoons when the school hallways smelled like bleach and stale cafeteria pizza. Jamal had just left his last class and was headed to his locker when he heard it, laughter. Not the kind that bubbles up naturally, but the sharp-edged kind that cuts through the air like a blade. A group of students had gathered near the vending machines, phones out, eyes locked on a screen. Jamal kept walking until he heard his name, or rather, the version they used. "Yo, Hoodie Boy's gone viral again," someone snorted. "Look at this." Jamal slowed. Another voice chimed in, high and mocking, "A hoodie, a dream, and no future." Laughter erupted. He knew what it was before he even turned. They had found the clip. The video someone secretly took last week, when he was studying at the back of the library, hood up, lips moving silently as he worked through equations in his notebook. They had added music, dramatic piano, and captions like "When you think you're in a movie but you're still broke." It was already spreading. In their group chats, on TikTok, maybe even beyond the school. Jamal didn't say anything. He didn't flinch. He just walked past them, his face unreadable beneath the fabric of his hood. But inside, something curled tightly in his chest, not anger, not quite shame, but something heavier. He didn't mind being invisible. But being mocked for trying? That burned. Later that night, sitting again at his corner in the library, he tried to focus. The equations blurred. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote, the numbers not lining up as neatly as they usually did. He could still hear their voices, still feel the sting of their laughter. But then, without even realizing it, he opened a new tab on the cracked laptop and searched, full-ride scholarships for low-income students. The first result, Harvard Financial Aid Initiative. He clicked. And something shifted. They could laugh. They could call him names. But they couldn't stop him from applying. Jamal's world shrank to the glow of his laptop screen and the weight of his ambition. The library became less of a place and more of a battleground, one where he fought every doubt, every sneer, every time someone said, "Be realistic." Each night, he stayed longer. When the staff flicked the lights at 8:55 p.m., signaling closing time, Jamal would pack up slowly, his mind still grinding through problem sets, essay prompts, and SAT vocab lists scribbled in tiny margins. He applied to schools most of his classmates wouldn't dare whisper, MIT, Stanford, Yale, but it was Harvard that held a gravity he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the name. It was what the name represented, proof that someone like him, hoodie and all, could belong in a room most people thought was off-limits. Still, the process was brutal. He worked on his personal statement every day for 3 weeks. Not because he didn't know what to write, but because he knew exactly what he wanted to say, and he was terrified it wouldn't be enough. He wrote about growing up with his grandmother, about the nights the heat didn't work, about how he learned to calculate loan interest before he understood how taxes worked. But mostly, he wrote about the hoodie. He explained how it became his second skin. How people looked past him, underestimated him, judged him before he opened his mouth. How he used that silence to build something no one could see coming. How being invisible gave him room to become dangerous, the good kind of dangerous, the kind that changed the room when he walked in. He had no counselor to proofread it. No one to polish his application. He submitted it with trembling hands in a hope that felt too big for his chest. Then came the wait. The weeks dragged like winters. Each day, he checked his email more times than he admitted. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. And then, one Friday afternoon, right after physics class, the subject line appeared. Harvard admissions decision. He stared at it for 5 whole minutes. Then clicked. The email loaded slowly, the library's ancient Wi-Fi lagging as if the universe itself was forcing Jamal to wait one more second. The screen flickered. His heart thudded like a war drum. And then, there it was, one word, bold and unmistakable at the top of the message. Congratulations. He didn't breathe. He couldn't. His eyes scanned the rest. We are thrilled to offer you admission to Harvard University's class of 2029. You have also been awarded a full financial aid package covering tuition, housing, meals, and books. He blinked, reread, scrolled down just to make sure it wasn't a mistake. But it wasn't. The boy in the oversized hoodie, the one they laughed at, the one they mocked for trying too hard, had just been invited to sit at one of the most selective tables in the world. And he wouldn't have to pay a single dollar to do it. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob, and for the first time in a long time, Jamal didn't care who saw. His shoulders shook, his fingers trembled, and his cracked laptop caught the reflection of a tear sliding down his cheek. The librarian approached cautiously, holding a stack of returns. She glanced at his screen and then back at his face. "Everything okay?" she asked. Jamal looked up, eyes glistening. "I got in," he said, barely more than a whisper. "Harvard. Full ride." For a moment, the quiet hum of the library seemed to still. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "You were the kid in the hoodie," she said softly. "I always knew you were working on something big." He laughed again, breathless. So did she. Outside, the world was the same. The air still cold. The sidewalk still cracked. The kids at school still unaware of what had just shifted. But inside Jamal's chest, the universe had exploded. Not because Harvard made him worthy, but because it proved what he always knew. They saw the hoodie. But they never saw the mind inside it. And now, they couldn't ignore it. The news hit the school like a thunderclap. It wasn't Jamal who told anyone, he hadn't planned to. But someone had seen his acceptance letter open on his laptop during study hall and snapped a blurry photo. By fourth period the next day, it was everywhere. First came the whispers in the hallways, "Did you hear about Jamal? No way. Harvard?" Then the posts on social media, spreading like wildfire, "Library boy got into Harvard on a full ride." By lunch, even the loudest kids at the corner table, the same ones who used to mock him for sitting alone with his notebooks, were silent when he walked by. Not hostile. Just stunned. The kid they laughed at, ignored, filmed for fun, had just outpaced them all. The principal called him into her office. He thought maybe he was in trouble. Instead, she stood when he entered, grinning like a proud aunt. "We're making an announcement," she said. "This kind of thing, it doesn't happen every day." He tried to deflect, to shrug it off. "I'd really rather just—" "No," she said gently. "You deserve this moment." And so it happened. That Friday, during the morning announcements, his name echoed through the school speakers. Congratulations to senior Jamal Carter, who has been accepted into Harvard University with a full scholarship. We are proud to celebrate his achievement. There was a pause after the announcement. Then a rumble of applause broke out in the cafeteria, slowly at first, but it spread. Teachers clapped in their classrooms. Students looked around, trying to figure out who had known him best, who had shared a class, who could say, "I always knew he was smart." He kept his head down. Not because he was ashamed, but because the attention felt louder than the years of being invisible. Later that day, in AP Physics, his teacher handed him a card. Inside was a note: "You didn't need Harvard to prove your worth, but I'm glad they recognized it." He tucked it into his hoodie pocket, close to his chest. Because this wasn't just about the college. This was about every kid who ever felt small. Every kid who sat alone at lunch. Every kid whose intelligence was hidden behind worn clothes, silence, or a hoodie. Jamal didn't say much that day. He didn't need to. The whole school was finally listening. A week later, Jamal walked into school and it felt like the walls had shifted. Teachers who had barely remembered his name were suddenly full of warmth, asking about his future plans, if he needed help choosing dorm supplies, if he'd speak at graduation. Students who had never spoken to him were now trying to sit at his table, tagging him in congratulatory posts as if they had always been friends. But Jamal remembered. He remembered the months no one had spoken to him at all. The snickers when he raised his hand. The time a substitute asked if he was in the wrong room because he was sitting in AP Chemistry. The sting of being called Hoodie Boy like it was something dirty. He didn't hold a grudge, but he didn't forget. And so, he walked the same hallways with a quiet calm, letting the noise pass through him. He still wore the hoodie. Not because he had to anymore, but because it had become a part of his story. A statement. He visited the library, his corner table, still his sanctuary, and left a note tucked inside one of the math books. It said, "To the next kid who sits here, you don't need to be loud to be great." He didn't sign it. At home, the neighborhood started to shift, too. His grandmother cried when the official envelope came in the mail. She taped the acceptance letter to the fridge like it was a family heirloom. The church printed his photo in the bulletin. Local reporters called for interviews. And then came the letter from a nearby nonprofit. They had seen the story, how a quiet kid in a hoodie made it to Harvard. They asked if he'd be willing to mentor younger students, to share his story, to maybe speak at a youth summit. He hesitated. Not because he didn't want to, but because, for so long, he hadn't spoken at all. But something inside him whispered, "Now's the time." He replied with one word, "Yes." Because now, his story wasn't just his. It was a beacon. And he was ready to light the way. The auditorium was packed. Students, parents, teachers, and even members of the local press filled the seats, murmuring with curiosity. The stage was modest, a wooden platform with a single podium and a banner overhead, "Voices of Tomorrow, Youth Summit 2025. Jamal stood backstage, hands in the pocket of his now iconic hoodie, his heart pounding hard enough to feel in his throat. He scanned the room through a slit in the curtain. Somewhere out there sat a group of sixth graders from his old middle school. He could see their sneakers swinging beneath the folding chairs, see one of them wearing a hoodie just like his, eyes wide, arms crossed, trying to look tough, but clearly watching everything. When the MC called his name, Harvard-bound scholar and local inspiration, Jamal Carter, the room erupted in applause. He stepped onto the stage slowly, not with swagger, but with quiet command. As he reached the podium, the clapping faded into an expectant hush. He didn't read from a script. He didn't need to. He just told the truth. He talked about being underestimated, about sitting in classrooms where no one expected him to lead. About the laughs, the camera phones, the whispers. About the nights he wanted to give up, and the nights he didn't. He spoke about his grandmother, the broken radiator in the library, the noise of doubt and the silence of determination. "I wore this hoodie," he said, gripping the edge of the podium, "because it made me feel safe. But people saw it as a sign that I didn't belong. That I wasn't serious. That I couldn't be great." He paused. They were wrong. A beat of silence. Then, thunderous applause. Jamal smiled, just a little. Not a performance, but something real. He saw the kid in the front row, hoodie pulled up, now sitting straighter than before. After the event, people lined up to shake his hand. Teachers asked for selfies. Parents called him a role model. One news anchor whispered, "You speak better than half the politicians I've interviewed." But Jamal didn't linger in the spotlight. Instead, as the crowd thinned, he made his way down the steps and found that sixth grader, the one who had sat alone, watching him the whole time. "You good at math?" Jamal asked. The boy shrugged. "I guess." Jamal handed him a folded piece of paper. "MIT's got free classes online. You like building stuff? Start here." The boy looked at the paper, then at Jamal. "You really going to Harvard?" Jamal nodded. "Full ride." The kid grinned. So did Jamal. Because in that moment, he realized, the hoodie didn't make him less. It made him visible, to the ones who needed to see him most.